Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Ben Crossman, and I hope all of you are having a great day, because today we have, of course, a good show planned for you where Dariush Derakhshani is our resident computer graphics expert, and we are going to be talking about something that I have been, I don't want to say purposely avoiding. I mean, you know, when it stumbles across, I definitely read it, but we have not talked about it on the show, but the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080, we're going to cover that with a fine-tooth comb, and we're going to talk all things graphics, computer, and a little bit more. So obviously a lot of great content here for the show today. Now, a few things before we get started with our guest, including computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything from the show notes, a link to our guest website, any articles that we do, any videos that we show here on the program today. They will be in one place. So if you're driving, if you're busy at work, don't worry, we got you covered. Also, be sure to check out the live video stream, which you can also find over at twitch.tv/computeramerica. And the social media contest, which we are currently working with Logitech to reboot that with a different prize, new prize. And we'll definitely let you know as soon as we get that back up and rolling. Now, all that and more at computeramerica.com. But let's go ahead, just bring on our guest, and get started with our talks. So again, Dariush Derakhshani, longtime Computer America correspondent, and of course, he's a professor. He teaches this by day and works on it. Kind of. I don't want to say like as a side job, because that kind of implies that he doesn't really take it seriously, but he's definitely a graphics professional, and we are really happy to have him on the show here with us. So welcome onto the program once again, Dariush Derakhshani. Dariush, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Ben, as always. It's good to be here.
Our pleasure, our pleasure. So before we get started, let's give a little bit of background on yourself. Computer graphics. I mean, how'd you get your start? And kind of what brings you onto Computer America?
Yeah, what got my start was just loving computers and not having the money when I was in high school, back in the 80s. So I kind of started building my own and studying to be an architect. And I got into CAD as a result of that. And from that, I got into animation, went to film school at USC for animation, and then I've been working in animation visual effects ever since.
Very, very cool. And of course, that's what brings you here, where you comment on the latest news, because this is a field that really, not even year over year, but month over month, it's really advancing by a lot. And so we're happy that you're here to break it down for us. And like I kind of teased at the beginning, NVIDIA, they, I think it was like the CEO a couple of months ago came out and he made the announcement that don't expect anything revolutionary when it comes to graphics cards for a couple of years. That's, that was kind of his feeling after the whole jump from the 9s to the 10s with the Pascal architecture. He said that, everything you're going to see is going to be pretty, kind of linear in terms of its development. Now, the RTX, we're moving from the GTX to the RTX, the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080. This has still made a lot of news. I don't think it's that revolution that everyone's talking about, but it's a very solid forward progression of graphics cards. So if you wouldn't mind, did you feel like kind of jumping into this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's been kind of the bulk of what I've been reading about this stuff since probably the end of August. There's quite a lot out there, and today I believe The Verge just published some of their benchmarks before
we got
that.
that up. Yep.
Yeah, I didn't see a whole lot of benchmarks. A lot of people were speculating and talking about it. I mean, there's two two new sort of things that the 2080 is bringing into the fray, and that's real-time ray tracing, something we've talked about a number of times over the last year or so that I've been on the show, even more actually. And the other thing is a deep learning super sampling, anti-aliasing, artificial intelligence, whatever that means. So the big thing is the real-time ray tracing, something we've talked about before. Ray tracing is more accurate to how light really works.
Hmm.
So you get truer reflections, truer shadows, better sense of lighting from your digital scenes. So ray tracing, is usually an offline rendering sort of thing, and we've talked about how real-time ray tracing could be a real coup for AR, especially AR, meaning augmented reality.
Right.
Certainly for VR as well to make it much more photoreal. But when you talk about rendering a CG scene and you're talking about doing photorealism, you're using ray tracing, bouncing light and indirect lighting and global illumination and so forth. So ray tracing is really the backbone of that. And there's
And
lot.
oh yeah,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, and I mean, just speaking to that technology, you obviously have worked, in CGI animation, things like that. How far back do you have to go before that was, kind of unrealistic to do that? Not just even in home computers, but
Mhm.
in a studio setting. Real time ray tracing, I think a lot of times had to be done, kind of post, in a lot of After Effects.
Yeah, yeah. Ray tracing essentially was never really real time. Ray tracing became more of a thing in studio work, probably in the 90s. I'd say in the mid 90s or so. I'm sure it's been around
Yeah.
longer, obviously, but in studio work with film, TV, commercial work, ray tracing in the studios that I've worked at really was in the mid to late 90s, is when it became more and more useful. But it became the mainstay of rendering probably in the late 90s, early 2000s as far as post-production work.
Hmm.
And that ended up being a lot of the Mental Ray was a big ray trace renderer back in the day. And it's owned by NVIDIA, and I think it's pretty much retired at this point. But there are a lot of players in the ray tracing field, from V-Ray to Maxwell to Arnold. All of these are renderers in production. Arnold and V-Ray being two of the bigger ones. But Redshift is a renderer that a lot of places are using, and it's a hardware based and really, really fast. So those are the players in the post-production field. We've speculated before on the show about how real-time ray tracing is sort of a holy grail for games because it's going to allow a much better level of quality and realism in your games.
Well, yeah, and
And the,
and just jumping real quick, for anyone out there watching the video, I think we're gonna throw up the NVIDIA real time ray tracing kind of demo that they gave, where they showed a lot of different, and not just the stormtroopers, but they showed a lot of today's games that you can play, and it's like and they kind of go on and off. And it really made a difference. I mean, if you really don't know what to look for, it just looks
yeah.
like kind of brighter. But you start noticing, like effects on surfaces that were before not reflective whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah, it does a nice job. I mean, if you guys are watching the video, you can see a shine on the top of my bald head from my overhead lights. That sort of thing is much more real with ray tracing rendering than with a scanline from before. So with hardware being able to do it real time, I say that in quotes because there's not a whole lot aside from demos that are ray tracing right now. It's going to bring a whole new level of quality and realism to games and to VR and to AR. So that's the big ticket with the 2080 and the 2070 and the 2080 Ti, which again the article we just posted from The
Right.
Verge has done a really nice job of taking a look at some of the benchmarks and comparing them to the 1080 version of the card and what sort of gains you're going to get. Because right now, if you get the 2080, you're not going to see much of anything that's ray traced or with the deep learning, the super sampling.
Yeah, and I figured that if we were, going to talk about the different graphics cards, we could start with the 2070, which is kind of the entry point to this. But even the entry point, and this is something that I brought up on the show before with phones, but graphics cards, this generation of NVIDIA graphics cards. Let's see, the prices were at the top here. The baseline, the 2070, starts at $500. I remember a time when consumer graphics cards, like they capped out at like 350 was a big ask, and then they started creeping up to like 400, and now I guess with the like Titan and some of the other kind of hobbyist prosumer cards, you're up there in the low thousands, 1,100, whatever. The prices for these things, did that strike you whatsoever? I mean, again, the RTX 2070, 500, the 2080, 700, and the Founders Edition just under 1,000.
Yeah, the 2080 Ti is about $1,000. That's part of inflation in a way. There's a lot of hardware packed into these things. So I don't doubt that NVIDIA has really put one of their best foots forward with these cards. It's expensive, these things are expensive. I don't know how long it'll stay at that price premium. The whole boom on crypto mining has sort of started subsiding over the last quarter.
True.
And we've seen the pricing of these video cards starting to come down. So hopefully the bubble on that is already burst. And hopefully over the next quarter or two, we can start seeing these initial prices start coming down 100 or 200, maybe $300 or so. I'd love to see the 2080 Ti priced around 750, 800.
Right.
I think that would be a more compelling price point. But again, I don't know if it's worth it just yet. There are some definite improvements on regular games, but the ray tracing and the deep learning super sampling, you're not going to get any titles for a while. NVIDIA is saying that there's a dozen or two titles that will be coming out imminently. I guess 11 games support full ray tracing right now, but again, it's not a lot, and spending $1,000 for that sort of thing, if you need to be careful about your budget, I don't think it's the time to get into it. But the step that they've made to have real-time ray tracing, that's the big ticket news. Even though The Verge is saying that their deep learning super sampling is maybe the most important part of the performance improvement, I beg to disagree. I think real-time ray tracing is the real headline here, and I think that's definitely the future of hardware computing for video cards. It's got to be ray tracing,
Right.
and the faster they do it, the better.
Yeah, it's to say, and there's something been about NVIDIA for the past couple of years, maybe the past decade. One of them being things like G-Sync. They put out this technology, be it deep learning, super sampling, or whatever. They put out this technology, and in a lot of cases, you can turn it on or you can turn it off, depending on if you want, let's say more frames per second. You can turn off, super sampling, and bam, you get more frames if it looks a little bit different, to the end user. But people are willing to sacrifice that as long as they get the frames that they want. And in some cases, again, kind of like G-Sync, I've even seen people just turn that off by default. Like they don't even care what the technology does. They just feel it's not optimized in every iteration of a game. So they just turn it off as a technology that's there, but it's more of a hindrance than something that actually helps. I feel like whenever NVIDIA tries to push something that says this is something that that only NVIDIA can do, a lot of people might look at that and go, that's a gimmick. That's not what a graphics card is really, designed to do.
Yeah, and to be fair, NVIDIA has really brought a lot of game to bear in their CUDA cores, and a lot of stuff that they've pioneered has been sort of proprietary to them.
Hmm.
But other, AMD is really the only other player in the field right now. They have their own version of some of these things that NVIDIA is doing, but NVIDIA's really been a market leader in pioneering a lot of these things. And CUDA performance, hardware acceleration, has been more standardized around what NVIDIA has put out, especially with CUDA. For example, hardware rendering with V-Ray, for example, is more optimized for CUDA because they have the larger market share. Of course, they do OpenCL, which is the more general widespread adopted standard
Right.
for hardware processing for video, sorry, GPU processing. So, but they're the leader, and I think that it's a very well deserved sort of moniker for them. AMD's made a lot of inroads with their cards, and they still probably hold the title of best price to performance for their cards. But NVIDIA's cards, as we're seeing now, we're going to see a fight for real-time ray tracing over the next year or two. And as more titles start to bring that up, hopefully we'll start seeing that in consoles, Xboxes and
Hmm.
PlayStations in the near future as well. Because I
That's
really do think that is the future of graphics, is being able to ray trace.
yeah, and in terms of importance of technological advancement, uh, last real one that kind of graphics wise that we all kind of agreed was a really big push. Just like going from standard definition to high definition was one of them. I would say going from I don't know. Actually, the real one that I'm trying to reference here is HDR. In terms of graphics improvement, how would you rate it kind of versus HDR? Because, we said that 4K versus high definition, that was something that you can do. It's going to make it look better, but it's not really
Right.
necessary. Go for
Yeah.
HDR over anything else. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
To me, I think ray tracing is more important than pretty much all of them. Going from HD to 4K, it's not that big of a deal for me. I like 4K because it gives me a bigger desktop, but it does slow things down. And really, the Verge was testing the 2080 Ti
Hmm.
as being the only card that's able to handle a game at 60 FPS at 4K. That's not that big of a deal. I mean, sure, it looks a little bit nicer, it looks crisper at 4K when you're playing it, but to me, ray tracing is going to give you a lot more detail. It's going to give you a lot more accuracy in the way that light is simulated in the game. And I think that brings a certain depth to the look of a game rather than just a higher resolution.
You are probably going to have to wait quite a while, unless Microsoft or Sony. I'm not going to count the Switch in this generation, but
Mhm.
unless the two big players come out with some kind of external graphics card kind of deal, where you can maybe just increase the performance of the consoles. You're looking at $1,000 graphics card that can barely do ray tracing. Like when I say barely, I
Yeah.
mean this is the first iteration of graphics card that can do it at all. So you can bet that future iterations are going to be much better at what it can currently do. Um,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
I'm thinking this is going to be a generational thing for the consoles.
yeah.
Maybe not a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox One X2 or whatever they're going to do. This is probably going to be a couple to a few years down the line before they get the cost down. I mean, the card alone is worth two Xbox One X's.
Right.
So there's got to be a lot of healthy competition, a lot of innovation in lowering the prices for consoles to be able to use it. So we're looking at maybe one or two generations down the road, and knowing these generations are 3, 4 year cycles for these
Yeah.
guys at this point, that's probably going to be the next big thing for consoles. But for now, PCs, they've got to get more titles out, more compelling titles that have these features that are enhanced, not just enhanced, but built with ray tracing in mind.
Right. Now, speaking, of course, of these cards and referencing, kind of the previous generation to this generation, they have one set of benchmarks that they kind of did with the GTX 1080 versus all of them on the 1440p instead of the 4K. That's essentially wider, like a really wide screen resolution. And kind of looking at the benchmarks that they gave it between the 1080, the 2080, and the 2080 Ti, there are some pretty notable improvements, but like we said, way at the beginning, this isn't a crazy leap in innovation. This is simply seems like a 20% performance increase, generation over generation.
Hmm. Yeah, and it is. I mean, it is sizable. So I mean,
Yeah.
if you've
Oh,
got
big.
a grand in your pocket, I say go for it. But if you don't have to, buy food or pay rent, at
Look,
that point, if you don't
priorities
have,
are what they have to be, and hey, food can
absolutely,
come second. I will say though that I do like this article from The Verge that you found, because it does highlight something that a lot of companies, everyone from Microsoft to Sony to a lot of others, have claimed for a while, and none of them can seem to get, and that's the idea of 60 frames per second at 4K, and that obviously that obviously requires a lot of horsepower, and
yeah.
that's something that Nvidia had claimed that you can do with this generation. And it's very telling whenever a company says, we're finally delivering on the promise we made uh, for years. And it's like, well, why do you keep promising it if you can't keep delivering it? And in this case, The Verge found the same thing. When you bump the resolution up to 4K in terms of RTX 2080, not just the Ti, but just the 2080, it's a few frames short of really meeting that benchmark, which may not sound like a lot, but the difference between 50
Yeah.
frames and 60 frames is noticeable.
It is. It is. If your heart is set on 4K gaming, you have to go with the Ti. You have to. Getting the regular flavor 2080 or even the 2070 won't get you there. The 2080 will get you close, but it's going to be frustrating. So I think 4K gaming at 60 hertz or 60 frames per second, it's a TI or it's waiting for the next generation, the 21s or the 3080s, whatever they're going to call them. I
Mm.
think it'll be more mainstream when we hit the next architecture.
Right. And I mean, obviously, if anyone out there wants to check out the article, they have all the different specs of the 4K machine that they tested this thing on. Uh, the TI seems really, really nice. I wish that they had, kind of compared it to a few more, I guess, kind of graphics cards that have parity,
Yeah,
including like the Titan XP. I wish that they had shown
absolutely.
that
Yeah.
along with it, because I believe that one is still just $100 more than the 2080 Ti.
Yeah, I mean that card is still sort of the 10 series is the performance king in a lot of ways. So they just put this against a regular 1080 Ti, I believe, and yeah, it's not enough. We got to see it against some other cards. Now, this just came out. I mean, I saw this article just this morning during my morning reading,
Right.
and so it's still early, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot more comparisons coming forth, hopefully with the Titan lineup as well. But I think again, in the end, if you're in the 9 series right now, you're looking to upgrade. The 2080 is the way to go. The Ti, if you can get it, as opposed to the 10 series, unless you're a budget shopper. What the 20s are going to do, they're going to drive the price of the 10s down over the next quarter. I'm sure that you're going to start seeing some good deals on the 1080 Ti. Maybe even some of the Titan cards as well will start getting cheaper, hopefully,
Yeah.
soon. So that's one benefit for the budget conscious as well, is you can get a 1080i or a 1080 Ti performance for cheaper, hopefully. If not, then it's a no-brainer that you got to go with the 2080 at this point.
Now, this, and we're going to switch articles over to this one from Engadget, where it's the NVIDIA RTX speed claims. They don't meet what they kind of claimed during their presentation
Hmm.
without, as you kind of said before, without these titles that are coming in the near future, and they mentioned they have a couple of them lined up. Uh, the speed claims are not there for existing games, which if you're looking to upgrade to, hopefully get your current game under control, I'm sure this thing is still going to perform admirably, but it's not going to be everything that they kind of promised in their presentation. So
Right.
I guess if we could kind of draw some comparisons to that compared to, we've talked about processors before, and it's just like with processors where you have, let's take the Threadripper. In some iterations, 36 threads or 18 cores, 36 threads. That's all good and well, but if no game is optimized to utilize more than 4 cores or 8 threads at a time, then the performance increases that they claim you can get, you will never see the light of day, just because it's the manufacturers aren't. Do you think that Nvidia putting
Absolutely.
this card out there, setting kind of, I don't want to say setting a new standard, because they already set the standard. The standard is what it is, but
Hmm.
do you think it's just by them putting out this hardware and it's improving in ways that are not optimized for old games but can be optimized for future software? Do you
Absolutely.
think that's a good move?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a chicken or the egg sort of thing, and NVIDIA has shown a few times over now that they're the chicken. They're going to put the card up, and then the eggs are going to follow. The games are going to start to follow. So I have no doubt that game titles are going to start shipping with real-time ray tracing, whether they're old titles that are enhanced with ray tracing, or if they're just built with ray tracing in mind. That is going to happen. A lot of cinematics, pre-rendered cinematics, are done with ray tracing. That's what makes them look great.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can imagine a really good game cinematic, but that's your actual gameplay, that's the level of increase we're talking about. So now that the hardware is going to be commercially available, the game studios, which put a lot of money into R&D, and they put a lot of money into development, so they can only take so many risks. They can be a little bit more assured that the hardware is going to be there for them to do this, and it's not a big switch for them. Programmatically, of course, it is a big switch. But as far as designing and building the 3D worlds, it's not that big of a switch to start envisioning the design of these to be ray traced. So I think the games are going to start following. I don't know how quick it'll be. I wouldn't rush out and buy the 2080 right now,
Right.
again, unless your daddy Warbucks.
Well,
But
although, and you may be able to shed some light on this, because there are naming schemes and price schemes. A few times, Nvidia has thrown around the phrase "Founders Edition." I don't know if that means like the first generation, but
yeah, I think so.
there are some notable upgrades between Founders Edition and a regular card. Like they're a little bit faster. I don't know why they designate that and why they make them a little bit better and a little bit faster, but I guess it rewards
I
people who do run out and go get it.
Yeah, it's to reward the early adopters for sure. I think these cards are clocked a little higher than the non-founders edition. These are like 0 day. This is a day one sort of issue. So they want to provide a benefit for the people that are willing to pay the premium for getting the full price card. So they're going to get a little bit of a faster card. How long that's going to last before new iterations are going to come out, or third party people like MSI or Asus or Zotac are going to start overclocking their own versions.
Hmm.
So it remains to be seen, but right now, it's the only ticket in town. That's the only way to get it. It's the Founders Edition. How long it'll take for Asus to come up with their own, I'm not entirely sure, but
I'm sure, but
that's when pricing is gonna
I'm
circle
sure.
them
I'm
down.
definitely sure by the holidays they'll have it all figured out. Hey, Darius,
I would
there's
think so.
music in the background. This show is already flying by. We'll come back. We'll wrap up the 2080 and the RTX, and then we have a couple more topics. Everyone, stay tuned. More Computer America with Dariush Derakhshani. Everyone, be right back.
We are all Brother Wolf. 10 years ago, a group of locals banded together to create positive change. We took animals into our homes, held adoption events at local retailers, and talked to the community about our mission to help build a no-kill Asheville. A decade later, we have achieved so many victories for animals in need. There's been so much progress, yet there's still so much to do. As part of our year-long celebration, we encourage you to become a member of our special Compassionate Circle program. With a monthly donation of $10 or more, you will have behind-the-scenes access to the work we are doing at Brother Wolf. Our goal is to reach 1,000 members because we receive no government funding. Working together, we can help build and sustain no-kill communities. Learn more at compassionatecircle.bwar.org. We are a 501c3 tax-deductible organization.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here. And yeah, we are talking with Dariush Derakhshani. He is, of course, our graphics expert, and we are talking all about the NVIDIA RTX 2080. I believe the change coming, of course, from the real-time ray tracing we've been talking about.
Right.
I can't imagine the R being anything else. So,
Yeah.
so obviously, NVIDIA is very proud of the technology they were able to cram into this. It's a pretty good, kind of step up from the 1080s. They have a couple of, The Verge had a couple of caveats. I'm seeing a lot of people are complaining a bit about the price, but like you said, we're coming off of some kind of sugar high from cryptocurrency miners. If I'm sure NVIDIA, and it's weird because like NVIDIA, I think last year when crypto mining was like really, or not even last year, but like this January, when crypto mining was really at its height, NVIDIA was like, hey, this is going to be our next 20% growth of our company. And they, showed their sales projections for the middle of the year. And they're like, oh yeah, we're not even going to factor crypto mining into our, into our projections anymore. It's just not even worth mentioning. So hopefully with that rise and fall, we see these prices kind of come back into something a little bit more manageable. But yeah. I guess we'll go with, let's see, we have one more article here. And that is the benefits it has to, I guess, as you're saying, augmented virtual reality and its ability to, let's see, real-time eye tracking and eye tracked rendering. So where does AR, VR, and I guess this, of course, folds into ray tracing, how does this improve these, AR and VR?
Definitely the look of AR and VR is going to be greatly increased. I've talked about this in previous shows. AR, augmented reality, really has to rely on the existing lighting situation of the scene. So there's kind of two steps in my mind to making really great AR. One is being able to render whatever is being augmented quickly, and this is real-time ray tracing. So that ability is starting to come into the fray now. The other is being able to read the environment and be able to replicate that lighting that you're actually standing in into the CG that's being augmented into your AR experience. So part of that is being able to track what you're seeing, where you're seeing it, and absorb that information and say, hey, there's a light source over here, and the sun is over there, and it's this bright and that bright, and it's going to start casting shadows and reflections in this way, and being able to simulate the augmented CG in that way. So obviously the real-time rendering is going to bring a lot of that calculation to bear. So I think with AR, the ability to work that technology into usable AR is going to be really fantastic.
I'm looking forward to, of course, the AR VR. If they can get AR objects like, let's say, and really this is something in the future, because even though you are paying $1,200 for an iPhone, maybe if you take it out to go do Pokemon Go or something like that, the Pokemon will have light. Let's say you're out in the sun, and it knows that the sun, based on your GPS location and how you're facing, it will know how the light from the sun is supposed to hit, kind of quote unquote the Pokemon. That it can make it look a little bit more realistic. And I think something as simple as that is going to add a lot of depth into a lot of augmented reality. So if they can make it look real, if they can make it look a lot better instead of just something like a cartoon laid over reality, you could see a whole nother kind of push for objects
Right.
in AR.
Right. And
Yep.
one of the things that one of the technologies that the 2080s are going to bring to bear also is something called foveated rendering. So when our eye is looking at something, when we're focused on it, the things in the periphery don't register as much detail to the brain. This type of rendering is called foveated rendering. These new GPUs support what's called a variable rate shading, which means it can detect what you're focused on and be able to divert or concentrate its processing power on making sure just what you're looking at has the highest rate of sampling, for example, has the highest quality, with the stuff on the periphery taking up less bandwidth and less processing. So it's an efficiency sort of thing. And these cards purport to have that support built in. And that will help AR reach these goals of that I just laid out.
I'm hoping that is an option that they can turn off, even if there's some kind of performance to lose, because they had something similar called screen blur, where let's say if you're in a first-person shooter game and you kind of whip your cursors around, or you whip your crosshairs around, it would kind of blur the screen so that it didn't have to render every new image that pops onto your screen or into your field of view. It didn't have to render it in full detail. It would just kind of give you a lower kind of rendering, and then when you stopped, it would then refine itself as it went.
Right.
It was definitely an efficiency sake. It was definitely something that made things run better, but it also caused a lot of motion sickness for me. And I feel like if I'm, kind of, and I know that's how the human eye works, so maybe it will be a little bit better than that. But if they don't get it right, that can cause, kind of motion sickness.
It could be weird. It could be weird. If you move your eye from one thing to another, it needs to resolve pretty immediately for you not to notice some sort of artifacting or weirdness. But people who are more sensitive to their peripheral vision may have a slightly different, experience that people that have less of a peripheral sense. with blurring as well, rendering motion blur in CG actually takes up quite a lot of time because simply sampling
Hmm.
sampling of blur takes a tremendous
Really?
amount of time, much more than crisp, sharp rendering. Because when you're blurring, you're smearing a lot of pixels together. So this technology that you're talking about sort of does a fake blur, which could have played more of a part in motion
Okay.
sickness than a real, really well simulated motion blur would have. So, it's a cheat, it's a fake, and that could have been the cause of your ill experience with it.
Right. Yeah, it's just let's put it this way. If they get this, kind of set in stone, and Microsoft can really take advantage of it, I am looking forward
Mm.
to Halo 6. Master Chief's
Yeah.
armor has always been something that, even back when the first Halo came out, Master Chief's armor was super, super cool because it did have kind of reflections in it, even if it wasn't
Yep.
real-time ray tracing. But if Halo 6 can utilize this kind of technology, it's going to be the whole game's going to play like a cinematic.
It's going to be amazing. I pretty much bought Xbox because of Halo.
Yeah.
Yeah, the newer Halo games, Halo 4, Halo 5, um, they were great. And then when they reissued Halo 1 through 3, there was the ability to kind of switch it back to
The Master Chief Collection had an updated
yeah,
graphics setting. Yeah.
exactly. So you could set it back to the original. And when you set it back to the original and even just the remaster with higher resolution textures and stuff like that made a big difference. And really goes to show you back in the day when you started playing Halo 1 and Halo 2, the graphics were amazing for what they were at that time. Just in the number of years between those Halos and Halo 5,
Mm-hmm.
huge improvements in the ability to deliver a huge amount of content, video content, and quality. Just
The,
imagine
the
what's going
the
to
the
happen.
ability to use more than 6 polygons per grunt. It
Right.
really it was amazing technology.
It's huge. It's huge. And plus the ability to load textures, because that's the part of the equation that a lot of people don't really think about. It's not just about the number of polygons. Um, Textures play a huge role because a good texture can simulate polygons. Normal mapping, for example, can simulate all sorts of wrinkle detail
Mm.
and all sorts of detail inside of polygons. So a single polygon with a good normal map could look like hundreds, if not thousands, of polygons. So being able to load high-res textures and use them appropriately would be great. And just again, ray tracing is a huge thing. And because I've been steeped in doing CG, I've been rendering ray tracing for decades now. And
Right.
it's just necessary. It's a necessary part of what we do. If you want anything that looks even remotely photoreal, you have to ray trace it. So to me, this is really the big news, and I hope it becomes the really big push with Nvidia, with AMD, with Samsung if they're sort of getting into video processing, presumably for handheld and phone devices. Intel, their GPU on CPU. I hope they all really push ray tracing because that is the de facto way of getting stuff that looks good in what I do.
Right.
So
It's going to be up to the consumer whether or not this push for again kind of 3D was not something that people really went for. There were graphics cards that promised to be the best to display 3D content. I mean, there
mhm.
are sometimes pushes that they try that just don't work. Ray tracing, though, just like HDR, seems like something that a lot of people are just going to immediately look at something and go, "That looks so much
Wow.
better
Yeah, that
than
looks
previous."
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to real-time ray tracing, HDR is nothing. It's just a way of getting better blacks and brighter whites. Dynamic range is great, and you've got a screen that can do HDR. It's going to make things look a little bit richer. But ray tracing is going to change the nature of what is in your scene and all the things that you
Well,
can see.
that's something that the Verge article that you linked kind of had at the bottom as kind of a footnote, was that if you invest, really, if you take the time to invest into a $1,000 graphics card, they also recommend that you invest in they said a 1440p because they didn't feel the 4K was really up to
Yeah,
up
it's
to
not
snuff
quite
yet.
there, yeah.
But they did also say you have to go with a 144 hertz monitor as well, which they're on the expensive side. They're still like $300-400 just for the monitor themselves. Maybe cheaper, maybe more expensive, but is that kind of your feeling as well? Like, if you're going to spend this much on a graphics card, please don't just use your 10-year-old monitor.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's like buying a Maserati, but
The
putting
old
donuts
tires.
on it
Yeah.
for tires. It's asinine. The Obviously the upgrades for a computer start with an SSD. That's the first purchase you got to make. The next purchase, if you have an old system, is to make sure your monitor is up to snuff. Now, I had a Dell 24-inch LCD for gosh knows how long, a super long time. That thing was a beast, an absolute monster. It lasted for a really long time. But over time, its color accuracy was starting to diminish. And then when I got into HP Dreamcolor and even this really sweet, I think it's a 32-inch BenQ
Mm-hmm.
that I've got with 10-bit color accuracy is much better. Now, for what I do, obviously, I need a professional grade monitor to see stuff on, but having a good monitor is going to be important and getting that good, deep, rich color. For gaming, it's all about the frame rate and getting the refresh rate of that screen and the pixel response times to be super fast at 1 or 2 millisecond. Professional screens with accurate color at best are in the 5-6 millisecond range, like this BenQ is. So it's an important thing to do
Right.
because if your video card is fantastic and can do HDR and the 10-bit color and all these wonderful things, if you're still hanging on to an old LCD, that should get upgraded first,
Right.
and then you can plunk down for a good card.
Right. All right. So good advice there. We're gonna switch off of the of the 2080 again. Let's hope that the games of tomorrow, like really, if this technology is kind of what you're promising, Darius, the games of next year and the year after are going to look so
I
good
hope, yeah,
that people are going to be like, why are we playing this if we can
absolutely,
play that? So
absolutely,
looking forward to that.
absolutely.
Now, we have a couple more articles here. We have about 10 minutes left. I think we can do 2 or 3 of them. Let's see. Let's talk. And actually, this kind of rolls into, we were just discussing screens. And we were talking about 4K, 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 how it's not the best thing. But I mean, don't avoid it just to avoid it. You have this article here about 8K. And you'd think that this maybe would be the first time we were hearing about 8K, but in fact, I think the first time I heard about 8K television was
Hmm.
about the first time I heard about 4K televisions, because some company in Japan was pushing an 8K TV just
Right.
because 8's twice as much as 4, therefore it's twice as better. Uh,
Hmm.
is that the case? And what's up with this article that you found from Engadget?
4K for television is pretty cool as long as the television is big enough. That's the key. So a 4K monitor is great because I'm sitting a foot away from it, so I can really tell the difference between an HD monitor and a 4K monitor. For gaming, it's not that great because the frame rates aren't quite there yet. But as far as just pure display, I love my 4K monitor. I also love my 4K TV. When we started talking about it quite a while ago on the show,
Mm-hmm.
there wasn't a whole lot of content that was in 4K. But now with streaming services, Netflix, Amazon, they're putting out a lot of 4K content.
Right.
Matter of fact, people who make shows for Netflix are more often than not required to deliver 4K. So they have to shoot or they have to master in 4K so Netflix can do that. So it's becoming part of the mainstream for sure. So 4K TV is great, But if it's small and you're sitting far away from it, you're never going to notice the difference between HD and 4K. You're just not. If you have a big enough TV or if you're sitting close enough to it, that's when 4K is going to really start making a mark. Now, 8K, yeah, 8K is twice as much. I mean, 8 is twice as much as 4, but it's actually quadruple the amount of pixels, right? Because it's squared. So 8K is redonkulous. Absolutely. Unless you have a ginormous screen and you're sitting just a few feet away from it, you will not notice the difference between 4K and 8K. You just won't.
Let's see. Let me Google something here. Let me Google something here real quick. Resolution of a jumbotron, because I would not be surprised if that was, or if that would be something very, very similar. Although, actually, I take that back. The resolution seems to be about the same as the VHS, because jumbotrons are pretty old technology. But that's essentially what you mean. It's like, unless you have like a jumbotron and you are 5 feet away from it, having a super high resolution prevents you from seeing small pixels on a large scale.
That's absolutely right. And that's why jumbotron works. You're seeing it from, 50, 60, 100, 200 feet away in a stadium. And you got to imagine a jumbotron, its pixels are huge. It's, like a light bulb, well, maybe like a small light bulb is the size of one of those pixels. But seen from 150 feet away, it all melts together and looks like one screen. But if you walk up, if you use a jumbotron as a monitor and you're 14 inches away from it, it's gonna be horrible. You're looking at individual pixels. And that's the thing with the 8K. If you're looking to upgrade your screen, 4K, great. You go ahead and get 4K.
Well,
that's going to be fine.
To put a real number to this this article that you have here, Samsung, being the company that is pushing this 8K, I'm sure there are others who will push it as well. But Samsung is releasing a 100-inch television. 100 inches is huge. That is a massive television.
It's a big screen.
Do you think that 8K is necessary to make a 100-inch screen look okay, or do you think that 4K could have sufficed?
4K absolutely could suffice. I've seen 4K projectors on 100-inch screens, and they look pretty amazing. These are professional grade projector screens. 8K between 4K at 100 inches, you would have to be sitting fairly close to it. Now, viewing angle, it's industry adopted standard basically that a 30-degree viewing angle, meaning 30 degrees of your vision is what's being taken up, is sort of the immersive experience that you expect in a movie theater. You can still see beyond the edges of the screen, but you're more encapsulated in what you're seeing at 30 degrees. So you've got to kind of calculate how far back you're sitting from your screen. I have a 65-inch TV. It's an Samsung LED, and we sit probably about 13, 14 feet back from it, and I don't notice the difference too much between HD content and 4K content.
Right.
Part of that is because Samsung does an amazing job of upscaling all of the content to their native 4K. The other is just the distance. When I'm standing and playing a video game with my son, we're maybe 5-6 feet away from the TV. That's when 4K becomes more apparent. So it's how far you sit away from it. So
did you say standing?
Yeah.
You stand and play video games.
Absolutely. We'll
what?
Sometimes we'll drag our comfy chairs and we'll sit in the middle of the living room. So we're about 6 feet away from it at that point, but we'll stand and we'll play, because then I have the TV mounted on the wall,
right?
We're eye level with the middle of the TV at that point. So it's kind of interesting, and my son likes to jump up and down when he gets excited.
As long as it works for you guys, then be weird. That's okay. But so 8K TVs, just like we were saying, some of the other monikers that they kind of throw on there as far as televisions go, including kind of the refresh rate, the OLED as opposed to LCD.
Yeah, that's a huge deal.
Other
That's a huge deal.
other labels that they kind of throw on after the 8K, 4K, those might be a little bit more important than the actual Ks that you get.
Absolutely. The biggest thing right now in my mind is OLED. OLED is what's called an emissive technology, meaning the pixels actually emit color. With LED, traditionally you have a backlighting, you have some other source of light that lights up the color. I have a really nice Samsung LED TV, and I want to smash it with a hammer and get an OLED because I can notice on the sides of my TV
Oh, it glows a
where
little.
the lighting is, as opposed to a nice even black field where there's not supposed to be. So that is to me the bigger image quality. And now I
Yeah. I'm sorry, just real quick. I mean, you want to smash it with a hammer? I at least recommend selling it on Craigslist or something. We just got rid
yeah,
of,
that's,
we just got rid of our TV. That I still don't really truly know what DLED technology is. It's like direct LED technology, but that's what it was utilizing. And when you look at it, I was like, I've been to CES. I've seen OLED. I got to get rid of this thing and make room. Like, I don't have an OLED TV yet, but I got to make room for as soon as I do get
yeah.
it, I can put this thing up. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
to be fair, Samsung has something called QLED.
right.
It's not light emitting like OLED is, but it looks pretty darn good. I love Samsung. I've got their phone, I've got their TV, everything syncs beautifully. But I don't know if I would do QLED. I'm just not sure. So
QLED is actually something that I did a bit of research on. I believe that's still the quantum dot technology that they're promising.
yes,
Quantum dot is definitely different than OLED. OLED Samsung makes
yes,
for phones and tablets. QLED is something
their TVs.
exclusive. Yeah, is although it's been developed since the 1990s. It's been around. So it's a pretty proven technology. It's just it wasn't feasible until this point, and some would
Right.
say, looking at the prices, still not feasible. But
It's expensive.
yeah,
Yeah, it's better than it was a couple of years ago for sure, but it's still pretty expensive to get a good 65-inch OLED. QLEDs are a little bit better, but they're still pricey.
yeah.
But again, I don't know. It's still a backlight situation. I think QLED does a much better job of lighting those pixels. But still, I don't know. I'm looking at the LG. I'm looking at the Sony OLED, and I think
hmm
that might be a better future. And I'm hoping Samsung makes an OLED because again, I really like their products.
It's one of those things where I think they feel like if they switch over to OLED like everyone else, even though they already make the technology, even though they could easily adapt it to
Right.
televisions, I feel like they might think that all the research and development and cost, maybe it's like a sunk cost fallacy that that they've sunk into QLED is just going to go out the window because people are going to say, why bother with
Yeah, maybe.
QLED? We have OLED. So
Yeah,
I think the
maybe,
two are pretty
maybe.
I really do think the two are pretty comparable,
They look
it's
amazing
yeah.
when I look at them side by side.
It's just preference.
There's just
So you prefer
yeah,
them, others are going to prefer the other, and hey, that's the beauty of that kind of thing. I will
yeah,
say that
it's
we're quickly running into the end of the show. We didn't get to a couple of articles that we're going to include in the show notes, and there was one I wanted to bring up to you because obviously you are not just only about graphics, but you are also a parent, and we've talked about
yes.
kind of parents, that kind of thing. Google released a new tool that you can turn off an Android phone within Google itself. Google now gives permissions to turn off phones. So I was going to talk about that, as well as this one that you found about Acer unveils a monstrous convertible gaming laptop,
Monster.
which looks like something. We were talking about Halo. It looks like something the Covenant would have made, but everyone, we'll probably touch on that next time. Dariush, if
Sounds
people want
good.
to find out more, where can they go?
Kush3D.com, super old website, don't even bother at this point. But you can find me Facebook or Twitter, and I just got a new HP laptop convertible that I'll be reviewing. So I'll
Very
have
cool.
Some feedback on that next show.
Yeah, looking forward to that. And everyone else out there, computeramerica.com, links to all this and more, as well as the videos that we showed here on the program. Dariush, until next month, thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. And yeah, and everyone else out there, thank you for tuning into Computer America. Have a great day. Catch you here next time tomorrow. Bye, everyone.